a concluding entry in a trilogy, eagerly anticipated by fans around the world. A script and story not fully realized as an inflexible release date quickly approaches. A studio going over the director's head, hastily making changes and altering the original vision. Countless scenes deleted, left on the cutting room floor. A completely different version of the film left unseen by audiences. A theatrical cut met with poor reviews from critics and vocal disappointment from the fanbase. If this sounds familiar, it's because we've seen this before with the production problems between 20th Century Fox and David Fincher that resulted in the controversial Alien 3. Studio interference is thought to be the biggest attribute in the problems of the third Alien film. This was a franchise once owned by Fox but now owned by Disney. And it looks like Disney followed familiar footsteps when it came to the production of their newest Star Wars film, and the mistakes of major studios have echoed from the past and repeated themselves in new ways in the modern day. It's like poetry. It rhymes. Last month, Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, was released into theaters, marking an end to Disney's new sequel trilogy that takes place after the events of the 1983 film Return of the Jedi. On an even larger scale, this was meant to serve as the epic concluding chapter of a 9-film series, tying everything together and closing the book on the Skywalker saga. A daunting task, but J.J. Abrams seemed up to it, and he seemed like the logical choice since he began the new trilogy with The Force Awakens in 2015, having set up a lot of story elements that were intended to be picked up and played with by the next director taking on the challenge of the next Star Wars film. That next director was Oscar nominee Rian Johnson, and the movie was The Last Jedi, which discarded many of those elements and played with others in a way that many fans passionately disagreed with. In fact, many have perceived a lot of what we see in The Rise of Skywalker as course-correcting, with hasty attempts to backtrack on certain concepts and character arcs, with plot contrivances that are in abundance even for Star Wars, and details also muddled together almost nonsensically that you just about need a guidebook to take along with you to the movie to understand the context of what's going on. I consider myself a big Star Wars fan, and for the last 5 years I've been following this new trilogy from Disney. There have been things about the new movies I enjoy immensely, and there have been other things that I strongly disliked and didn't think quite worked. But like a lot of people, I was still looking forward to the final film in the new trilogy, The Rise of Skywalker, and went in with tempered expectations. It's been about a month now since its release, and I'm still kind of scratching my head over it. Something about it felt a little off. Plot points were thrown around at breakneck speed, characters felt a little inconsistent in relation to the other two movies and even within this one movie itself. There were revelations and twists that didn't feel earned and didn't make much sense, and on the whole, it felt kind of unsatisfying. As an end to the new trilogy and as an end to the 9-episode Skywalker saga. I think a lot of people felt this way. A lot of people felt even more negatively toward the movie, and I've spent a great deal of time watching YouTube reviews and essays on the movie, listening to fans express where they felt the film went wrong, looking at articles and social media posts related to the movies, and just trying to make sense of what I saw. And yes, I got the visual dictionary, by the way. It's pretty cool, actually. But what's the most interesting to me, and what has started sort of an affection I've felt begin to grow with The Rise of Skywalker, is hearing about all the cuts that were made, and how the version that hit theaters wasn't necessarily what J.J. Abrams intended to bring to the screen. How there could possibly be a completely different cut somewhere, maybe, hopefully, to be released in some capacity someday, somehow. Ideally, we wouldn't have to wait a decade for it, like we did with the assembly cut of Alien 3, but maybe there's a better, more coherent, more meaningful movie out there. That, I think, is very interesting to consider. The common ground The Rise of Skywalker now has with Alien 3 is also very interesting to consider. No matter what studio is helming what franchise, I think we'll always see situations like this, and we'll always see mistakes get made with our favorite properties. Disney purchased the rights to 20th Century Fox's properties last year, so Disney now owns Alien. From what little we've heard so far, there are plans to continue the series under its new ownership. It should be an exciting thing, knowing that a new Alien movie is on the horizon, but instead, it's been kind of distressing for fans. On this channel alone, all I have to do is even mention Disney and Alien in the same sentence, and I'll get an onslaught of comments to the tune of Disney should leave Alien alone, or Disney's going to ruin Alien, just like they ruined Star Wars, which is worrying. Whether you agree with the sentiments or not, it's worrying that we have fans who would literally rather have nothing than to see a new Alien movie under Disney. Has it really come to this? Is the prospect of a new Alien movie under Disney Studios, or whatever studio connected to Disney makes it, more terrifying than having the franchise die? Star Wars and Alien are ultimately very different properties, but they're both big franchises with immediate brand name recognition. They both have big, devoted, protective fan bases, and they're both owned by Disney. Now, having seen the new Star Wars trilogy in its entirety, finally able to see how it turned out as a whole with each movie, with each story decision, with each massive production that these were, I think some of the mistakes they made could be considered carefully in the approach to the next Alien movie. I'm not intending to crap all over the new Star Wars movies and dissect all the specifics, but I want to take a look more at the general areas and common ground that could be applied to Alien as well. One of the most important traits that Star Wars and Alien have in common is that they are big franchises that all began with one movie. So the sequels, prequels, novels, comics, video games, they all stem from the first movie in the series. Film is in their origins, film is in their blood, so to speak, and the immediate association will always be with the movies. Compare that to the Disney-owned Marvel series, whose origins lie in comic books. The movies wouldn't exist without the comic books, instead of the other way around, but no matter the source material, each end up lending to each other. And expanded universe material can easily develop into source material, and fit into a larger canon. Maybe one of the biggest mistakes of the new Star Wars trilogy, right from the very beginning, was abandoning years, decades worth of expanded universe stories. The powers that be classified any stories taking place after Return of the Jedi, whether directly or indirectly related to the Skywalkers, as non-canon, as the stuff of legend. The new continuity begins with The Force Awakens, the new source of any expanded universe material that may emerge. This was a controversial move, and I don't think they realized just how revered a lot of these works were. Obviously, they had to do their own thing with the new movies, and it wouldn't exactly be all that exciting to lift expanded universe stories, more or less, and adapt them, but they could have made some attempt to leave the door open just a little bit, even acknowledging some stories in some ways. Even just conceptually take certain things and even certain characters and mold it in a certain way. Again, looking at the Marvel movies, it's not like they adapted the Infinity War story panel for panel or anything, but they took the general concept and made it work within the context of their movie, and fans really appreciated that. So, to later see the producer of Star Wars, Kathleen Kennedy, quoted as basically saying, "We don't have any source material," was a point of offense to a lot of Star Wars fans. You had the source material, you just chose to erase it. What we ended up getting in The Force Awakens was a movie that followed very similar story notes to the source material in A New Hope, sprinkled throughout with vague hints of other story elements that may or may not be picked up in the next movie. The mystery box elements, as JJ so lovingly called them. Rian Johnson came in for the next movie and made the creative decision to not really follow those breadcrumbs and kind of do his own thing, which may have revealed more than ever before to that point the problems with the direction this series had. Maybe the biggest problem is that there wasn't any overall defined direction, so the guy just did what he wanted. Some have praised The Last Jedi for that, and some have said it absolutely ruined Star Wars, but you can't deny how bold of a move it was on Disney's part to give a single writer-director so much creative control. Then, of course, the third movie had to work around the defiances of the second movie to pick up the pieces of the first movie, and it felt almost like a panicked production. The studio had to go over the head of the director of the third movie, making changes and cuts throughout production up to the 11th hour and compromise that creative vision, while in the previous movie the director had so much more freedom with his creative vision. Looking at how all this developed now, looking back on it, is pretty wild. Maybe these kinds of moves were a mistake for Star Wars, but I think there is a lesson to keep the faith with directors that should be lent to Alien. Star Wars has always been associated with one man and one creative vision, George Lucas, even the movies he didn't write or direct. But the idea is one big story over the course of a trilogy with one creator's vision guiding the way through all of them. We associate and even expect that with Star Wars, but this was never really the case with Alien, at least before the prequels. In fact, the Alien series became known for showcasing the talents of new up-and-coming directors who had their own unique approach to the Alien universe. Ridley Scott, James Cameron, David Fincher, and Jean-Pierre Jeunet each had their own style to each movie, each feeling very different and standalone, with no urgent need to keep a tonal continuity that spread over the entire series. Part of the appeal of the Alien movies, at least the first 4, is seeing how differently the concept could be approached. There's something very exciting about that. If a new Alien movie is made, I'd love to see that tradition continue. And I'd hope that Disney isn't apprehensive about giving over creative control to their directors after the results seen with Star Wars. Maybe nobody can make a Star Wars movie with the same kind of authority George Lucas could, but their instinct in recruiting talents such as J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson wasn't wrong, just wrong for Star Wars maybe. Imagine if either of them directed an Alien movie instead of Star Wars. I think Alien is a more appropriate sandbox to play within. And there are so many different things that so many different directors could do with Alien, but the studio has to trust them to do it. As the audience, we like to see new things and fresh ideas, so there's definitely another pitfall suffered by the new Star Wars movies in catering to nostalgia. It was a difficult task to tie in the old and the new, since fans of course want to see their old favorite characters again, but they also want to engage with new ones, and they just couldn't resist tying the key new characters to old ones. The villain of the new series, Kylo Ren, just had to be related to Darth Vader. The hero, Rey, just had to be related to... well, I'll keep this spoiler-free, but she's related to a character from the older movies, which we find out halfway through the final movie of the trilogy. Maybe a little too late. Maybe not effective enough as a gesture, after the first movie, which shrouded the character in mystery, inevitably leading us to wonder who she may be related to. And after the second movie, which gave some the glimmer of hope that maybe this character was wholly individual, not tied to any legacy, maybe with her own unique origin and backstory. And then, with the third movie, forgetting all that. A bloodline connection does not equal character development. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that if we end up with a new Alien sequel, not a Scott prequel, or even the one from Neil Blomkamp for that matter, if we get something completely different and a new continuity, I don't think it's worth tying to the characters of the previous movies. So if we get a character that just happens to be related to Ripley, maybe a long-lost sister or cousin, or another child that we never knew about, it's not really going to help the movie and probably will only inspire eye rolls, especially if they save it for some shocking reveal like they did with Star Wars. We already have Amanda Ripley from Alien Isolation, who fits in perfectly with her own story, and to a lesser extent there's Decker from the Alien novel Sea of Sorrows, so no need to shake that family tree anymore. I think if the writing's good enough, new characters can thrive in the world of Alien, without the need of tying it to originals. I love Sigourney Weaver, I love the Ripley character. If they can work her into a new movie somehow, I would be absolutely overjoyed, but not at the cost of nonsensical story backflips and contrivances that end up cheapening the character and their place within the series. Let's not forget that Shane Black's Predator movie almost ended with Ripley and Newt appearing in modern day through time travel technology. At what a cost that return of the characters would have been. Sometimes you have to let the past die. Kill it if you have to. There's no telling just yet what exactly the future has in store for Alien, but I'd like to hold out some hope that there's some hope to hold out for. Disney has the rights to the franchise, but I don't see that as a kiss of death just because the Star Wars movies perhaps weren't what we could have hoped for. Star Wars, after all, is the biggest property ever. There is no way they could please everyone, and there are many different hopes from many different fans for what these sequels could have been anyway, so I think they just tried to appeal to everyone on the planet with those new movies, and with that kind of mindset, of course it's going to fail. But Alien is different, catering to different tastes. Alien is to Star Wars what the Rolling Stones were to the Beatles, as writer-producer David Giler once put it. The world has seen the new Star Wars movies. Audiences and fans have judged. It certainly made Disney a lot of money in the process, but it's not without its severe criticisms. Stepping down from the hugest pop culture platform imaginable, now's the time to assess what has worked and what has not worked and apply it to their other properties. Now is the time, I think, for more Alien, and if whoever ends up in charge takes to heart some of the mistakes made by Star Wars, I think the next Alien film could be something very special. I hope they maintain some reverence for the expanded universe of Alien. They don't trip over the continuity of the movies too severely, so I don't think there's any reason to axe it at all. In fact, I think the expanded universe could work as source material. There are plenty of intriguing ideas and characters and general concepts that could be applied with great success to a new movie. Imagine if they actually took the Earth War storyline from the comics and brought it into a movie. Not an exact retelling, not point for point, but the concept itself would make for a great movie, or trilogy of movies, if appropriately tailored to do so. I hope if Sigourney Weaver ends up a part of the movies or not, the legacy of the character is at least maintained. No time travel, no surprise relatives, just respect for the character, in her inclusion or in her absence. I hope we get to see fresh and exciting work from fresh and exciting directors with world-class special effects that the series should be known for, and I hope the studio has the bravery to trust the vision of such directors, to an extent obviously. And almost needless to say, it should be on brand, in the sense that it's rated R, with blood and guts and slime and naughty language. We don't need to see the Disney Castle logo before the credits roll. We don't need to sit down and watch the movie with little Jimmy on Disney+. No, we need a mature, adult audience-targeted movie, and believe me, there is a market for that. You don't expect these kinds of things from Star Wars, but you do from Alien, and if you fail to meet those expectations in the attempt to target all audiences, you'll lose a more concentrated one. Star Wars was the big one for Disney. It was the huge, pretty much guaranteed moneymaker with the widest possible audience, and though I'm sure we won't see the last of big, hyped-up Star Wars releases, I think Disney will be exploring its other newly acquired properties. I hear another Planet of the Apes movie is in the works, and maybe, just maybe, Alien will follow. If they steer clear of the mistakes of the new Star Wars movies, they just might win back the approval of all those who have been worried about how they may handle the series, and a new era of Alien could be born. But that's just me, in my opinion. That's just what I perceive to be mistakes, and how I think they should be avoided. You may not feel the same. You may even feel strongly that the franchise should just rest, and that's perfectly fine, but assuming a new Alien movie from Disney is going to happen either way, how do you think it should be handled? What kind of mistakes do you feel Star Wars made that could also be applied to Alien? And just generally, I guess, what do you want to see in the next Alien movie, regardless of the studio? Comment below and share your thoughts. As always, I'd like to thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a like, and you can also subscribe for all the latest videos from the channel. A very, very special thanks goes out to WEYLAND YUTANI executives, EmYarUk, Mark Fox, and Lady Anne. And our queen, Albert Newell, part of the Patreon Hive. If you'd like to join the Hive and support the channel, check out my Patreon page for exclusive posts and contests. In the meantime, you can catch up with Alien Theory over social media. Follow @alien_theory on Twitter and @alientheoryyt on Facebook and Instagram for more. And until next time, this is Alien Theory, signing off.